I'm Amy Axelson, joined by my mom, Barbara Axelson, and this is Juvenile Svengalis. Have some fun with us and join us in our search for what happened to my mom's grandfather. Welcome to Juvenile Svengalis, where we find out what happened to Byron Wadsworth Culver, Princeton graduate, successful businessman, asylum inmate, and juvenile Svengali.
On this episode of Juvenile Svengalis,
Eau Claire is one of the most substantial towns in northwest Wisconsin. Most of its 20,000 inhabitants are concerned in one way or another in the great lumbering interests, the foundries, factories, or mills, which make it a humming business place.
Last time on Juvenile Svengalis.
Your grandfather was Draco Malfoy.
I'm sorry. Did you explain this to your boys?
I'm starting to understand why we don't know a lot about him.
In Wood County, Wisconsin, on some highway that says Wood County Insane Asylum. It's an old barn, and it's painted on the sign of the barn. And I was talking to somebody not long ago, and it's preserved. They can't get rid of it. The grounds out in this farmland in Wisconsin where Norwood Mental Institution existed for many, many years, 60, 70 years.
But we don't know why he was there.
No, he did something.
So Professor Hester is interviewing the boys. He's learning as much as he can about the boys.
Back to Juvenile Svengalis and what Professor Hester, Byron, and Lum are up to.
Professor Hester found out all he could learn about the boys, though without asking either of them for information. He was told by other boys that they were in the habit of giving nightly exhibitions in Randall Park, where they created millionaires for a moment, made lads walk to the pond with imaginary fishing lines and catch imaginary whales, persuaded others to hug trees under the delusion that they were girls, and do a lot of other things that hypnotists do.
Real quick, we're just going to talk about my mom's grandmother, who was married to Byron.
So how old was he? Was there an age difference between Margaret and Byron?
Not really. He was born in 1885, and she was born, I think, in 1888, I believe. So, common, 3 years? That's pretty typical. Her childhood was that of a very wealthy, the daughter of a very wealthy, prominent businessman in Eau Claire. And they had a huge house they called Oakwood Place, and it had an elevator in it, a ballroom on the third floor. And it's if you've ever seen pictures of it, it's an enormous house.
Yeah, we didn't grow up in an enormous house. I don't live in an enormous house. I don't live in a house.
The Gilded Age house that you would have in Eau Claire, Wisconsin at that time. It was built in the 1880s. That was grandmother's childhood. And she went to Wellesley and came back to Eau Claire, and then in 1910 married Byron. And Byron's childhood turns out to be a little strange. Yes, a little bit more eventful than that.
Professor Hester was not surprised to learn that nearly every boy in the school was eager to emulate Lum and Byron, and that they possessed a sort of circulating library, which was devoted exclusively to hypnotism and the ways and means of practicing the art.
Circulating library, activity of hypnotism. This is interesting, and I will get back to that later.
The professor thought that perhaps the craze would die out after the boys had tired of it, and he was disposed to let it run its course.
This gets weirder. So there's this article article, and it goes on to talk about like these exhibitions they're doing and the notoriety that they're trying to get.
Is there a feeling that my grandfather was trying to get his 15 minutes of fame, or is this just fun?
I don't know, but he definitely liked the attention. He was in the paper quite a bit and on a national level. He was a well-known kid.
But he changed his mind one day when a teacher reported to him that young Skatvoldt had exercised his power over another boy in the schoolroom by compelling him to drink a cup of water which the teacher had the boy bring up from the basement to be used in diluting some ink that had thickened. The boy came into the room carrying the cup in his hand and was approaching the teacher's desk as if to deposit it there, when he suddenly halted and looked steadily at young Skatvoldt. Then, in sight of the whole class, he deliberately raised the cup to his lips and drank the contents. In the eyes of the teacher, it was a bit of insubordination that warranted immediate punishment, and going over to the boy, she seized him by the collar and shook him vigorously. He appeared to be half asleep for a moment, and then awakened to a full sense of his position. "Why did you drink that water? I sent you for it to use in the dilution of ink," said the teacher angrily. "I did not drink any water," was the unexpected reply.
They're like having a standoff.
Tries it on teacher. A giggling from the lower part of the room caused the teacher to turn her eyes in that direction, and she thought she saw Lum Skatvoldt and two other boys trying to hide their laughter behind geographies. She is a resolute little woman. Her name is Miss Dunphy. She had heard about the hypnotism business, and instantly suspecting that young Skatvoldt had had something to do with the other boy's conduct, went over in the direction of Skatvoldt's desk to see about the matter. She detected Skatvoldt rolling his queer eyes at her from behind his book. "See here," exclaimed Miss Dunphy to the hypnotist. "If you try any of that hypnotism on me, I'll hypnotize you in a way you will not forget, and you will not be in a trance while I do it, either."
Well, there's Miss Dunphy. She's having none of it. Okay, so what I found out about these two, Byron's old man, Joseph, has an office on Barstow Street, and Lum, his father, lives around there. Culvers don't live by Lum's house, but father's business is by Lum's house.
But the boy, as if confident of his own power, did not remove his eyes from the teacher's.
So he was like distracted by Skatvoldt.
Byron's father is a lawyer. His office is near where the other boy lives. Is that what you're saying?
The coachman, and the coachman also has like a business. So the father, who's a coachman, has a livery or whatever, I think would say, would lead me to believe that Byron was hanging out there.
Right.
Because he's dead.
4 years earlier, in 1893, when Byron was 9 years old, his 6-year-old sister died, as well as his father. Byron's mother and older siblings were running the business down on Barstow Street.
Miss Dunphy became exasperated and swooped down on Skatvoldt. She took him by the coat collar, unceremoniously jerked him out of his seat into the aisle. What happened after that is vividly described by a boy who was an eyewitness of the hypnotist's discomfiture. This is the way he tells it. "Miss Dunphy didn't do a thing to Lum. She wasn't no Trilby."
Trilby? What is that? What's Trilby?
Hypnotism was no match for the anger and resentment of a teacher. Lum has since decided that Miss Dunphy is not a good subject.
So it didn't work on him.
Oh, did the boy drink ink, or did he drink? What did he drink?
Well, here's the funny part: is like the reports in the newspapers say he drank ink, and that makes it kind of more sensational. But he didn't. He drank water to dilute the ink. But when you read the national reports, so this incident with this water becomes national news.
Oh.
Because the teacher, she got upset about it.
Reports went nationwide. Progress, Shreveport, Louisiana, on October 16, 1897. The Rock Island Argus, Rock Island, Illinois. Iowa City Democrat, Independent Indianapolis Journal reported.
That affair served to bring the whole matter to Professor Hester in an official way, and he decided to tell Superintendent Gross all about what he had seen and heard. Mr. Gross, who is a quiet, easy-tempered man, related Professor Hester's communication to President Emmett Horan of the school board. Mr. Gross says that Mr. Horan did not issue any order, but Mr. Gross instructed Professor Hester first, and then the principals of all the other schools of the city, to serve notice upon their pupils that the hypnotism business must be stopped under pain of expulsion.
Okay.
Mr. Gross did not inquire actively into the conditions at the other grammar schools of the city, and he did not know, therefore, except in a vague way, whether the craze that had taken full hold of the pupils of the 7th Ward had extended to them.
So was this a craze?
There's a lot of context here. So, a couple things.
Turns out that this was not Eau Claire, Wisconsin's first rodeo in terms of being the epicenter of hypnotic controversy. 4 years earlier, there had been an incident.
So she's saying, according to this article, that she was her ruin, which I'm assuming means sexually assaulted. Is that what
that's what I get out of it, yeah.
And that they did that by hypnotizing her.
1893 turned out to be an interesting year for Byron and his family. His little sister Maud dies. She's about 6 years old on April 6th. His father dies the same year, December 17th, 1893. But let's get back to 1897 and Juvenile Svengalis.
The order was withheld from publication for a few days, but the local papers finally got it, and it created a sensation all over Eau Claire. The sensation, however, seemed to arise more from the fact that they were schoolboys who could put other people to sleep than from any other cause, and young Skatvoldt and Culver suddenly found themselves famous.
So they got these little Svengalis running around.
And Grandpa, and my grandfather.
And your grandfather is Byron Culver.
The notoriety they have been receiving has had a curious effect upon the boys of other schools. Every night during the present week, parties of lads have been coming down into South Barstow Street, where the Leader is published, and giving exhibitions of their skill as hypnotists. Last night, 20 boys assembled on the sidewalk opposite the newspaper office, and one of their number used his magic power over 3 others. He had one of his victims dive from the walk to the street, another walk out to the car tracks and stretch himself across the rails, and the third climb a telegraph pole. Then he hastened across to the Leader office and asked City Editor Atkinson to step outside and see the result of his handiwork.
But what happened is around this time there was a visit by a guy named Santini.
It's Santinelli.
And
like a Houdini kind of a guy?
Yeah, there's like a traveling musician, right? A traveling magician. There's a couple of them. And they come to the opera house and to the music hall regularly. And it's a thing. It just kind of seems like they're imitating this famous magician, okay?
Sure.
But this all gets a little weirder.
Looking for notoriety. "Put my name in the paper," he exclaimed. "I'm as good a hypnotist as anybody." The city authorities have prohibited the boys from giving any more exhibitions in Randall Park upon the ground that it is dangerous business, and that some subject might be left in a cataleptic condition until his life was jeopardized. This order doubtless had its origin in a story to the effect that young Skatvoldt had hypnotized another boy at 8 o'clock last Monday evening and forgot to wake him up until nearly 11 o'clock. It appears that Skatvoldt and some other boys ran away from the victim to play a game of some sort, and forgetting all about him, left him standing against a tree in the center of the park.
Touring shows may have influenced the boys.
Yeah, so they lock people, this Clapper guy starts locking people up in glass boxes because they start doing all these shows.
It's Kepler the magician.
Just before they broke up to go home, the boys remembered that the sleeper had been left behind, and Skatvoldt returned to the park to awaken him. The boy was found standing against the tree where he had been left. A few sharp hand claps and a command to awaken brought him out of the trance, but he was exhausted and began to cry. It appears that the lad has been more or less hysterical ever since. Some of the boys who have been hypnotized have submitted to the pin and needle sticking tests that are used by the professionals to prove that their power robs men of all sense of feeling. But most of the youngsters who have volunteered to permit themselves to be wooed into trances have refused to let anybody stick pins or anything else into them.
Shows off of this, but that's all as a result of these two boys starting this craze, right?
Well, the boys kind of started it.
When a correspondent for the Chronicle visited the 7th Ward School Friday afternoon for the purpose of interviewing young Culver and Skatvoldt, Professor Hester was at first of the opinion that they could be seen, and he recommended the visitor to return at 4 o'clock. The professor seemed to think that the fame which his pupils was acquiring was not at all peculiar in view of their achievements, but he did say that it would be better to let the matter drop on the boy's account. When the visitor returned to the school at 4 o'clock, Professor informed him that he had consulted his teachers in the meantime, and they were unanimously of the opinion that it would be better not to hold an interview inside the school. If we were to continue the practice of calling the boys out to be talked to by every person who might express a desire to see them, said the professor, they will quickly begin to feel a sense of self-glorification that will interfere with their usefulness in schoolwork. I'm afraid that this sort of thing will demoralize them.
So these two are very entitled and are running around and doing all these like crazy things with kids. It's this Miss Dunphy that's having none of this. She's just done.
Anxious to exhibit. But the professor could not control the instincts of his precocious pupils. As they emerged from their rooms a few moments later to march out of the building, they seemed to divine that there was a reporter in the vicinity, and when a few moments later the correspondent went downstairs, he was surrounded by a party of boys who eagerly informed him that they knew where Lum and Byron, the boys who hypnotizes, was. Around the corner of the building where there is a pump, not less than 200 boys were assembled. They came forward to meet the correspondent in a body, every one of them yelling at the top of his voice or striking and pushing with all of his strength, regardless of consequences.
Today when I was talking to Amy, she was mentioning something about Santarelli?
Okay, let me just stop you there.
Okay.
Okay, because in the middle of all this, in these crazy articles that we've come across, we've found, first of all, Mark was this crazy genius, but he's found, in his need to get everything right and make sure his everything is pronounced correctly. We've talked about different pronunciations of words and different pronunciations of names and references to things. But in the meantime, in order to find out that kind of information, we stumbled on other information. But there's a couple of characters that kind of stand out here.
I'm Byron Culver, spoke up a little fellow who was pushed out of the main body. I'm the hypnotist. And I'm Lum, exclaimed another boy, who took his place at Byron's side. They're the boys, the whole school cried in chorus, and there was a scampering and skylarking and twisting and wriggling and pushing in which not even the hypnotists, notwithstanding the respect in which they were held, were neglected. The combined height of the two miniature magicians would not exceed 8 feet, and their combined weight not more than 135 pounds.
Okay.
There's 4 hypnotists, maybe 5 characters that kind of stand out here. There's this Bancroft character who was this magician, kind of a dilettante. He was from Eau Claire. He had this big crazy show with all kinds of sets and animals, but he was young and he died.
Come over to the park and we'll show you, said a freckle-faced lad, the bell ringer of the school. He explains his distinction upon the ground that the bell he rings is so small that the janitor, a big, brawny Swede, disdains to touch it. The Swede had declared it to be a boy's bell and has threatened to strike if he is asked to ring it. Professor Hester, rather than precipitate trouble, has made the freckle-faced boy official bell ringer.
Right before all.
Right, I'm looking at the article and it says it was the home of the magician Bancroft, who died a few months ago. Died a few months ago, excited the admiration of every boy in town. Okay.
Right.
Lum and Byron started for the park. All the rest of the school followed. Even the girls, though they advanced timidly, with their arms drawn through each other's, followed at a distance. There were halts every 15 or 20 feet to enable some boy to register a kick about some other boy, or to listen to the complaints of Lum and Byron against such a mob following at their heels.
But he was a magician, and he kind of had a big idea and burned out, kind of like a big Silicon Valley type. He's kind of the WeWork or a fire festival of magicians. He comes up with crazy ideas with these big sets, way too expensive, doesn't really do a good job, and he died.
"Yous fellows makes me tired," said Lum, turning upon a party of primer-class youngsters who followed at his heels as if they anticipated that something was about to happen that they ought to see.
There's this Flint, who's kind of this hypnotist, I guess. I don't really know much about him, but he kind of is more of a legal person. His angle with hypnotism is less on the showmanship side and more on the how does it get into the legal system side. I believe he might be a lawyer. Or he's a doctor.
Herbert Flint, put a pin in him because that is a name you are gonna want to know.
Private party arranged. There was an important consultation in the middle of the road, about halfway to the park. It was decided that it would be dangerous to undertake to make an experiment there on account of Superintendent Gross's order. A very small boy whose big blue eyes expressed the admiration he felt for the young hypnotists offered to solve the difficulty. He said his mother was away from home, and that if the boys would promise to be still and not break any windows, he would undertake to accommodate a limited number of them in his father's smoking room, while Lum and Byron gave an exhibition of their powers.
Okay. Then there's this Tyndall guy, who is some kind of Northwestern professor who just keeps screwing that he's this genius hypnotist.
This is the Tyndall?
Yes, this guy's nuts. Well, he's a real kind of a bumbling professor.
Yeah.
And am I right? And he buries some guy, and the police come in and are like, "What are you doing?"
What?
He's like, "No."
Trying to imitate the Houdini can the guy escape
Right.
idea.
Right. And he just screwing it up left and right. He hypnotizes people, but he gets out of it but he's a professor, so people really need to take him seriously, but he's just not good at it, right? But then there emerges sensational.
Yeah, which is spelled wrong in the Chicago Chronicle, we figured out.
So because that's a dentist in Kenosha. So, yes, anyway.
So this, and he's young, and he's handsome, and he knows what he's doing. And he's doing kind of cutting-edge technique stuff. What becomes interesting about the juvenile Svengali end of it is that these guys, the Lum and Byron, are able to really catch fire and create a movement that I would argue extends from Sentinelli being highly successful.
I'm sorry, let's get back to the boys in the parlor.
This was satisfactory until the young man had selected the boys he wanted to be his guests. Then all who were left out set up a howl of discontent. The house was reached, and the hypnotists and 3 or 4 others admitted. Among them was a tall boy considerably older than either Byron or Lum, who was recognized as their subject. The boy is disposed to be fat. His eyes are a queer grayish color and lack luster. Once inside the house, the blinds were drawn to prevent the horde outside from peeping in. And then Lum proceeded with the confidence of a professional to put his subject to sleep. Advancing upon him, he waved his hands before his eyes 3 or 4 times.
So as we get to know more about Byron than my grandmother or mother ever has, I start to wonder, the circulating library, was that the key to Byron and Lum's hypnotic talent? Is it possible that the boys caught the attention of Santinelli when he did a show earlier that fall? And had the boys gain access or the attention of Santinelli? Did this have something to do with my great-grandfather's institutionalization? But as we were looking for clues in the article, we found another article about a similar event 3 years earlier in Eau Claire, right after the death of Byron's father and 6-year-old sister.
So I'm looking at this article, and Amy, this article is just absolutely amazing. It's from the Savannah Morning News on December 18th, 1894.
So this is from Savannah, Georgia, right?
Yeah. So this is big news, national news.
National news.
On the next episode of Juvenile Svengalis.
No, you want to pick a rabbit hole. Alleged perpetrator of this possible crime was a member of the Vitopathic Institute.
The Vitopathic Institute?
This is her story, and her story...
A hypnotic green parrot?
So weird. Okay. So this is what they say that she says. This is what the newspaper says that she says.
An abduction and a possible double murder. Join us as we uncover what happened to my mom's grandfather and the bizarre world and colorful cast of characters we discover in the most unlikely of places, the Gilded Age of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Thank you for listening to Juvenile Svengalis. We hope to see you next time. This is Amy Axelson.
And I'm Barb Axelson, and this is Juvenile Svengalis. A special thank you to Mark Glenn, TF. Music by Jason Shaw of Audionautics.com. Simon Sounds, Dude Awesome, and Frankie of freesound.org. Thank you for listening to Juvenile Svengalis. Juvenile Svengalis is written, edited, and produced by Amy Axelson.